It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendu. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's a very tense time across the country. The last week has been quite heavy for a lot of people, with news from just across the country. It's not very pleasant. I think paramount on people's minds has been the Kuje jailbreak, which has left a lot of questions unanswered. Wondering how that was able to happen and how we are not sure if that will be the last one, considering how many jailbreaks have happened in the last couple of months. So that's sort of taking politics to the back burner. And of course, Lagos has also been in the news in the last couple of days with floodings, and it brings back the question of how a supposed megacity should be functioning. Yes, we do know that the population is in overdrive, and people migrating to Lagos for better opportunities continues to happen. But the fact that we are hearing stories about cars sinking and people almost losing their lives as a result of rain in 2022 has left a lot of people wondering why we keep asking these questions every year. But in all of this, I think all of these issues are still tied to government, and with government comes politics. And of course, the elections in 2023 are still heavy on people's minds. There's a lot of conversations about the presidency, but there's a lot more than the presidency that comes with governance. So we're going to be trying to dissect that and see how we can get some answers, hopefully before campaign proper begins for the general elections next year. I have here with me Akesi Shiun Adedamola Shiwaju. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right into it. Like with all the issues I mentioned, it keeps, the conversation keeps going back to the fact that maybe governance has failed Nigerians, which is why a lot of this is happening. Insecurity continues to be widespread, and elections in Nigeria have a tendency of making those things go into overdrive. What does good leadership look like to you? Because people are wondering, as the elections are coming, what should we be looking out for? And I'm not just talking about the presidency. What should we be looking out for in candidates? Because all the conversations these days seem to be about zoning and where the person is from and whose turn is it, as against what we should be asking rightfully.
Well, that's a very important question in this journey that we are on. In my honest opinion, good leadership, where we are as a country, must be a leadership that inspires hope. So you talk about all of the things that are happening in the country at this time. There's a sense of despair. And people, a lot of people are just up and leaving because they look like there is no hope. And so the first thing I think that a good leadership will portend in 2023 is a leadership that is able to inspire hope. They say that people can live without food, but no people can live without hope. A hope that it doesn't matter what today is, it's going to be better tomorrow. It's also important that, to me, good leadership in 2023 must be a leadership that has empathy. A leadership that can feel what people feel. As a leader, and this is not only politically, but as a leader, they say people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So it's very important. I think it's one of the things that anybody that is coming to the affairs, to the ends of affair in this nation, in my ward, in my state, in my local government, across board, must be able to empathize with people and feel. And there seems to be a disconnect between the leaders and the led. And until the led see that you feel what they feel, they'll never trust you. So
I guess the next question is, how do we get that out of the leaders? Because you talked about hope there. 1999 was a great time for a lot of Nigerians. Democracy was coming back. There was a lot of hope that things were going to change. And I mentioned change there now because 2015 also came with some more hope that, there was a new ruling party, things were different, there were a lot of promises made. But we're back here now, some will say even worse than we were in the past, with regards to what we expected. And is hope really enough? And if hope is enough, and you're talking about empathy, how do we then make sure that we are able to hold people accountable when they get in there, as against what they tell us before they get in there?
Right. So you ask, is hope really enough? If hope is not enough, but it's a starting point, because every election cycle what they peddle for us is hope. I'm going to do better than the last person. You haven't actually seen the person do it. It's hope. So, but you see, inspiring hope comes at varying degrees, and that's why I'm hammering on it. But you see, I think that one of the things we need to understand is that there has to be an equilibrium in governance between the government and the governed. And that seems to be where we are getting it not quite well in Nigeria. I explain. There's something I call the bane of the Nigerian people. It's both a blessing and a curse to us: resilience. Nigerians are very resilient. And that is what makes us go outside of the shores of this country and they say we're excelling. Because we're adaptable, you know, we can excel. You go through all of the rigors of growing up in this kind of country and, you know, you still thrive. But the flip side, it also makes us move on easily and adapt to things that are not acceptable. And until, you know, my people in Yoruba say that usually a goat does not bite until you push the goat to the wall. But you see, the power of resilience is in Nigeria. When they push you to the wall, you break the wall and escape. And that is, you know, it's a blessing, but it's also a bane in our life. We must find, you know, it's any leader that can get away with anything will continue to get away with it until the people say, hang on a minute, this is not what we signed up for. And I also think it is important how we have that engagement. It doesn't have to be confrontational. It does not have to be riotous. You know, look at the Arab Springs. Everybody thought this was going to be it, but how many of them have survived beyond that? We must look for intellectual, and that is why empathy on the part of the leadership is also important. Okay. We speak, you understand where we're coming from. You don't have to agree with us, but at least you empathize with us enough to see our position. Okay. And I think it's on both sides.
Okay, I think we're joined now from our Abuja studios by Oke Epia, who's a public affairs analyst. Okay, thanks for joining us. And I want to ask you about, you know, the conversation around, you know, zoning and regions and all of that. On the one side, people have continued to argue that it's taken away from the conversations which matter, which is about, you know, what the people want. But on the flip side as well, there's the constant conversation about, you know, how Nigeria needs to be more regionalized with governance. Maybe we need to tap into that more. And the restructuring conversation is one that a lot of people don't like to have, but seems inevitable at the same time. What are your thoughts on how we can move this country forward while drawing from what already exists? I mean, we can't deny the fact that we come from certain places, and maybe, especially with the number of people we have in this country, 200 million people is no joke. We need to decentralize properly. How do you see that ever happening?
Thank you, Bukan. Pleasure having you on the show this afternoon. I think that the first place to begin is to make the point that Nigerians should be very conscious of the antics of politicians, especially during electioneering seasons like this, to divide us. And so they throw up dogmas like ethnicity, region, zoning, and all of those to attempt to curry emotions, to curry passions, and to make Nigerians seem divided. You know, but Nigerians are not as divided as they make us seem. You know, there are countless, you know, ways to explain this. You know, being conscious of that antic, however, does not mean that these are not our realities. Our realities is that Nigeria is a multifarious, multi-ethnic, you know, multi-religious society that needs to have some form of fine balancing. You know, otherwise, I mean, the forces of centripetalism would pull us apart. So there must be something that would try to bring us together. And so that is why you have the contraptions around or about zoning and all of that, you know. But that is just what they are. I mean, they are contraptions, and we can engage them with some sense of reasonableness. You know, what Nigerians should be looking out for really is, which is paramount. You know, who is able. What sets of leaders are able to deliver the goods? And what are the goods we talk about? You know, the sad story has been that we are not able to get good governance. We're not able to have services delivered to us by those who have elected into office. And why is that so? That is so is because we have not been able to sufficiently and effectively demand accountability from government. So I am saying this to throw back to your first question, even though it was not to me, but I just wanted to make the point. Leadership, that inspires hope is not enough. It's certainly not enough. Leadership that takes advantage of the resilience of people, of citizens, is crooked. We need a leadership that is able to deliver accountability. A leadership that says to citizens that, look, I am your leader. I would lead by example. I would lead from the front. And if there are failings, I would take responsibility for the failings. And I would ensure that those failings are not repeated to the best of my abilities. But the reverse is the case. We have seen failings. You started off the show with how, the very, despondent situation we are in security-wise, which appears to be making politics, take the back seat. But this is not new. We have seen these situations arise again and again, almost since the beginning of this current administration. But Nigerians have become so tolerant. Nigerians have come to accommodate just too much that this becomes like, it's become like part of us, and so leaders seem to have that feeling that, look, they can always get away with these things. And that is why I think that the current consciousness amongst Nigerians, especially young people, should be sustained and harmonized to a sense of, beyond just the candidates, which those, energies are built around. It should be harmonized to be able to, beyond 2023, get our leaders to be accountable to citizens.
I want to jump on that now. Sorry to cut you in there, but I actually,
for which they are elected are.
Sorry to cut you in there. I just wanted to, because that was my follow-up question.
Answer to that.
Sorry, that was my follow-up question to you, because, this conversation about young people and anger has come up a lot in the last couple of months now. There's the conversation about, is this anger channeled properly? And you talked about harmonizing it there, because there's always this conversation about, well, elections are not won on social media and all the anger is there. But on the streets, the people who actually vote don't seem to reflect, what we see, on social media, or what you might call upwardly mobile young people. How do you harmonize that sort of anger, for want of a better word, post-2023, and use it to hold government accountable? Is this an issue with people not being angry enough? Is it an issue of the institutions not being there for us to be able to hold government accountable? Because like we always hear, the center is a little too strong for anybody to be able to do anything even.
Right, that's a brilliant question. And let me use this opportunity to debunk that recurring talk about elections are not won on social media. This is all a social media buzz. So I listened to some fellow on TV the other day say it's a pop, and with a little prick, it's going to pop, and all of this will fizzle out. Yes, that's an opinion, and we should debunk that, because we have seen that galvanizing can start virtually, and then it can lead to something really meaningful. We have seen cases, we have seen experiences before, even in this country. We saw that happen in the Arab Springs. We have seen that happen in this country. In 2020, we know what happened. How much of all of that anger that had built up over the years, led Nigerians to pour out onto the streets. So demands police reforms and all forms of campaign against bad governance. So these things can actually translate, into results. So we should vehemently resist this talk about this is social media stuff. This is elections are not won on social media. We have to do the stuff that we have to do on social media. And then the strategy is, how do we translate it to the reality, to the real world, and how do we sustain it, which is what your question is. Yes, the anger is perhaps not sufficient, because we need to, show a little more anger, as long as it is within the realms of law, and orderliness. We have rights to express ourselves in this country. We should use those rights. We should essentially be able to channel that anger into a sustained and effective demand for good governance. And the question around how do we do that away from the candidature of certain individuals, contesting for office in 2023. If you ask me, what we need to do is to build up ideologies, is to build up a mindset that goes
Okay.
beyond the candidates.
All right.
Build a mindset that goes beyond electing or focusing on the presidential elections, focusing on the governorship elections. In other words, focusing on just elections around the executive, arm of government. One critical component of the electioneering process that we haven't quite spoken enough about, and I think we should do a lot more on that, is the legislature. The individuals who are going to be in governments with the presidents, with the governors in the states. Why are we not focusing on them? Do we know
Okay,
them?
I'll come back.
What do we know about them?
All right,
What are their
I'll come
own
back to you.
manifestos? What are their own inclinations and ideologies?
All right, I'll come back to you.
So if we do not
let me come back to
certain-
the studio now with you, Makasi. Going from what he said now, I think the one thing I feel is that we seem to want to hold government accountable when they get into office, which is good enough. But because of, like I said, maybe the institutions are so weak that we don't even have channels. And like I also said, the center is so strong that there's even nowhere to penetrate to hold government accountable. How is it possible to start from the election season to hold people to their promises and tell them that if you don't do this, this is the consequence? Is there a way for that to happen from the election season?
I contested for primaries
Yes.
in May. And so I am able to speak from a practical point of view. In my opinion, after the experience that I've gone through in the last 14 months, is getting a PVC is doing a little too late. Because getting a PVC does not get your favorite. It does not necessarily get the brightest and the best on the ballot box. Getting a PVC just gives you the opportunity to vote the people that the system have trusted on you. And so if we're really, and I've also listened to this debate about Twitter and all of that. I'll give you an instance. When I was running for my primaries and I lost by 1 vote, that's a story for another day. The people that had to make a decision, and I was very active on Twitter, I was like, oh yeah, go. I went, the first day I attended a ward meeting. It is a totally different ball game from what is written on Twitter. And that is not to disparage what is going on Twitter. And then I kept having this discussion with my friends. One day I said, you know what, let's go. I contested in Augusta. Let's go to Ijebu. They were talking, we're going to do. By the time we got to the meeting, on our way back, I was like, let's have a debrief. It might not be the same thing, no. So there is a world of difference. And if we want to really take the horn by the bull, we must join a political party and be part of the process. All of these things affect our life. If I'm campaigning to you as a ward chairman, and I tell you, I brought 250,000 for you, you're probably going to look at me like, what exactly are you going to do for our constituents when you get to office? You know why? Because you don't need my 250,000. But if nothing exists in a vacuum. If you don't do it, other people who are interested in my 250,000 will do it. And it will not matter to them what promises I'm going to keep or not. What am I bringing to the table? And there begins the problem, because you cannot hold them accountable. Why? Because you don't have the power to put them there during the primaries. And so the people that can hold them accountable are the people that have the tickets, the party identification, that can vote in the primaries. And those are the people, and that is if we want to really do this, everybody must become more, politically conscious and active. Join a political party. I hope you join mine, but you don't have to join mine. Join one, be part of the process, and that way it's easier for you, because they need you, and they know politicians, they know they need people in the party, because you give them the ticket, and getting the ticket of the party is 60% of the job. And so if people that can ask them questions, can look them in the face, are more politically involved, I think that would help us to also hold them accountable.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This is a conversation that I know will continue to go on for quite a while. Elections are about 7 months away.
Yeah, indeed.
It's a long journey, but it's also a short journey. They say a day in politics is a week in a lifetime. So hopefully people are listening. And I know the argument about joining political parties is very, very key. And hopefully people will take that to heart. And moving forward, we are more politically conscious. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you very much as well, okay, Pierre. We'll take a break now and we'll be right back. Please stay with us.